This is DearPsychopomp. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Please note that I am not a professional psychologist, doctor, or lawyer. The information and discussions shared on this podcast are intended for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Some of the topics covered may be emotionally intense or triggering, especially for those who are still moving through grief or similar experiences. Please take care of yourself, and if you feel that any content is too overwhelming, it is important to seek support from a loved one or a licensed professional. Your well-being is important, and I encourage you to prioritize self-care as you listen. My guest today is Becky. She is the mastermind behind deadparentswhatnow.com, and her goal is to demystify the bureaucracy of death and dying with a little bit of humor. Becky, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I have been following you on Instagram for a while now, and just everything that you share, it's just, I love that you add in the humor with it, because you gotta laugh to keep from crying sometimes.
Yes, you absolutely do. And I also think that it can make topics that are not only sad and difficult to discuss, but also topics that are sometimes kind of boring to discuss a little bit more interesting. Like, you get into the nitty-gritty of estate law. And again, like you said at the beginning, I am not a professional lawyer. I am just someone who, for research, has audited an estate law class and read an entire textbook, because this is my life now. So I think in order to get through the legalese and make it something that people can pay attention to, it's helpful to have a little bit of humor in there.
It is. And I mean, having that, like, coming from my background, I was, in the first responder world for a long time, and you develop that sense of humor with everything that you're dealing with to be able to kind of help you get through the motions. And I used to be a cemetery director, so I've heard all the best jokes.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell people I'm a death doula, they're like, "Oh, people are just dying to see ya." And I'm like, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, yes. I think the gallows humor kind of... I actually gave a presentation at the library once about how humor is really important when you're dealing with grief and when you're dealing with death and loss and all of those subjects. I even think the physical aspects of laughter can really be helpful. I think one reason crying is so helpful is because there's a physical response there, but I think laughing gives us an even, well, not even more, but, a similar response. You're moving your shoulders, you're bending over because you're laughing so hard. I don't know. I think that laughter can be not a substitute for crying, but it can be a good companion to crying.
Absolutely, yeah. And you get that physiological, you get all the brain chemicals, and it makes you smile, and you're like, oh, all right,
yeah,
I can do this.
Exactly. In the days after my parents' deaths, laughter, and leading up to their deaths, laughter was very important for me. Just having things that I could rely on, things that were completely unrelated to just make me giggle. Like when my dad was in hospice, I have some amazing friends, and they brought over the game Twister, and we played Twister. So, like, my dad is in the hospital dying. I don't want to think about that. I've been thinking about it virtually nonstop, and we all just got around and got tangled up playing Twister and fell down and had a great time, and it was so funny. And so it's weird that leading up to that moment, I have a really fond, funny memory from that time, and that really helped me get through it.
I think that's beautiful, because and not knowing your entire story, so let me know if I'm being insensitive at all, but a lot of people listening may have family or friends in hospice, and when you're going through something like that, it is all consuming, and it's okay to be sad and happy at the same time. Just because your life is about to change and you're feeling that anticipatory grief, it doesn't mean that you are required to put your life on hold. You are required to never smile, And I think a lot of people feel conflicted about having those happy moments during those times.
Yeah, I think they feel guilty. And as someone who was raised Catholic in the Midwest, I know a lot about guilt. But I do think that there's really no reason to feel guilty about that stuff. You're not going to get anything about it. Of course you're going to be sad. It's totally normal to feel grief, but never smiling, never taking time for yourself, putting your life entirely on hold and dedicating yourself solely to mourning or advance mourning isn't going to solve the situation for you. It's not going to change things. And it's not going to make you a better person either, like the person who sacrificed it all while their loved one was, was on the path toward death. I just, and I get that impulse too. I obviously when someone's dying, you want to be around them as much as possible, unless you had a strained relationship. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that this is all just a normal part of life, even if it's a hard part of life. And so the other aspects of life don't necessarily need to go away. And in fact, the parts of life that bring you joy, those aspects of life are what's going to get you through this time period.
You need that balance. And I think especially with caretaker burnout, it's some people, I can understand why people want to put everything on pause and just give absolutely everything they have to that person, because they know that, time is precious and time is running out. But at the same time, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to make the grieving process so much more difficult. And I think part of the issue with that is the isolation, because it's such a personal, vulnerable thing to say, hey, my loved one is passing away and I'm at hospice and I'm meeting with doctors and I'm just busy with estate planning, and there's so much that can, hi puppy.
Yes,
there's so much that can be it can just fully consume you as a way of dissociation.
Yes, I think it can really put you on it's the classic thing of you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So if you're not taking time to replenish your own cup to sort of live your own life, then you're not going to serve the person who's in hospice as well, or the person you're caregiving for. You're not going to serve them as well. You're not going to be as prepared to deal with all of the tasks that you have to deal with after their death, which is one reason why I started doing this, is because I just did not understand the enormity of what was going to be asked of me. And I got really mad that no one prepares you for this and that we don't talk about it.
Right? This should be a class in school.
Yes.
With why wills are important, why you should pre-plan, why it's important to have those difficult conversations so that when the time comes, you know what to do.
Yeah, talking about death is hard, but also talking about money. There's a taboo against that as well. And so it's really important to talk about that stuff. And my parents and I never really did. Like, my dad had mentioned, that there was a trust, but we didn't have a real discussion about it. And I knew I was going to be the executor, and I knew that they wanted to be cremated, and that was kind of it. That's all I really knew. I didn't know what being an executor meant, or I knew it had something to do with the law. Okay, so there's a will or something, and I gotta do a thing with it, or whatever. Yeah. And I went to my dad's lawyer immediately after he died and said, hey, okay, so I know that this is something I have to do. What do I do? And he, I think part of it was him speaking legalese, and part of it was me not knowing exactly what to ask, but it was not a very helpful conversation. And so that's really kind of when I started doing this whole journey on my own and doing more research and putting it online so that other people could figure it out, because it's not always clear. Okay, so there's a will. What do you do with a will? What are you supposed to do with a will? And the answer is bring it to your local probate court, but not a lot of people know that. Why is it important to have a lawyer? Can you do this without a lawyer? And the answer is usually not, sometimes yes, but typically you do need a lawyer. And then sometimes you have a lawyer, and if you have enough money, you can just pay that lawyer to do basically everything and have very little involvement yourself, but not everybody has that kind of money where they can just, drop all their money on a very expensive lawyer and, just look the other way and have the lawyer figure out everything. So,
that's a privilege.
Yeah.
That not everybody has. And I think, I wish everyone could just have a lawyer be like, here, let me take this for you and do everything the right way and honor their wishes, because grief changes you chemically.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a sudden death or you had the anticipatory grief and it's old age or sickness, like, it's still going to change you as soon as it happens. And so you get the brain fog, you get the fatigue, you get the burnout, and now you have to deal with the law
mm-hmm.
and planning, and people are bombarding you with well wishes and questions, and you're like, pfft.
And you're dealing with their grief too. So you are grieving. You are grieving, you are dealing with other people's grief because you have to tell everyone, and then you are trying to plan a funeral, and also you're trying to deal with a bunch of legal and financial decisions that you may or may not even understand. It was pretty galling when I got there, and I just couldn't believe that, because I would ask my friends' parents, and I would ask my aunts and uncles, like, okay, so when this happened with your parents, what did you do? And they either didn't remember because all they could remember was the grief, or they didn't remember the specific details, or they had just had a lawyer do most of the work. And so it was really frustrating because I just didn't even know where to begin. And so I kind of had to figure out things the hard way, and I decided other people shouldn't have to figure things out the hard way if I can help it. So I figured, since I was a writer, I was just going to put what I figured out on the internet and, go from there and announce loudly that I am not a lawyer or an accountant or anything like that, and just say, here is advice from one friend in a bad position to another friend in a bad position. Let's figure this out.
Yes, which is such a beautiful gift for you to give, especially nowadays in the 21st century. It's not the same as it was back in the day. Everything is changing constantly, and there's so many different types of interment and everything like that. There's, when I worked in the industry, every 10 years, it was completely different. All the prices, all the terminology, all the suppliers, like everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to constantly keep up with it. So I'm really grateful for what you do. And I think the fact that you quit your corporate communications job to focus on helping people with that is just so honorable.
Thank you. It was very scary. Part of it was I had gotten this book deal. I was a writer. I was in a lucky position. I was a writer before this. I had an agent. But then once I created the website, I started getting emails from editors, asking about whether I had a book in mind. So I emailed my agent, and I was like, how do you make a book proposal? Because I had been writing fiction before this, so I did not really know how to write a nonfiction book proposal. And she helped me do that. But once I got the book deal, and once I was in full swing writing this book, and I had trained as a death doula, I had audited that estate law course, I had, and some of this was for research, and some of this was my own curiosity in making the website as accurate as it can be, all of that. And it just seemed like more and more of my life was pulling in that direction. And I was like, well, how long can you ignore the universe telling you that you should do something? And I'm also in a ironically lucky position, I guess, in that because I have dead parents, I am in a position where I can quit my corporate job at this moment. It's not like never work again money, but it's like, if you quit your corporate job, you will not immediately die money. So,
which is nice.
A huge privilege. It's really, and it's a complicated privilege because sometimes I feel really bad about that and guilty because I wish everybody could just quit their corporate jobs and pursue their life dreams or whatever. But I would rather, I guess, still have my corporate job and have alive parents.
Of course, yeah. It's so bittersweet.
It is. It's really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a strange feeling, and I think they were both small business owners, so I think that they would be really proud, but or they would think I was crazy. I suppose that's possible too.
What a beautiful act of love from them for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to give that comfort.
Yeah.
And that security to be able to sit down and say, okay, what am I being called to?
Mm-hmm.
Is such a gift. And so my next question for you is what's your story? What happened with your parents?
Yeah, I guess we should talk about that since I've been talking about all of the after effects. So here's what happened. In 2020, my mom died. She did not die of COVID, but I was very worried that she was going to be in the hospital and we weren't going to be able to be with her because that was at the time during the pandemic when they weren't letting family members into hospitals. She had liver disease. She had been an alcoholic not for my whole life, but for several years and had struggled with alcoholism. And so eventually she died of liver disease. It was a better death than I thought we were going to get. We were able to be with her at home when she passed. So I was there with my dad and my sister. And it was obviously very hard, but it was something I had expected for several years based on her condition. And, you know, it was complicated, but I was glad that she could have a peaceful death at home with all of us. And we were able to bring hospice workers right into the house, so she was able to die, you know, with a hospice nurse there helping us and telling us what to do. Hospice workers are just amazing people. They really know their stuff, yeah. And so my mom died at home, and obviously my dad was still alive at that time, so he took care of most of the estate stuff, you know, the death planning, the funeral planning, but my sister and I were both old enough that we helped. So we helped pick out an urn, we helped pick out, you know, I wrote the obituary, we helped pick out and plan her memorial, which we didn't do immediately, obviously, because 2020, so we waited a year. That was kind of rough, but also necessary. So we planned a fun memorial at her favorite pizza joint, and we had it outside and served her favorite pizza. That was great. I think it was a lot of fun. My sister played music. Yeah. Anyway, so my mom had died. Sad, but life is moving on. We are progressing. I moved from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky, just on a pandemic-driven whim of being able to move to this new city where my dog could have more space and all of this stuff. And then a few months after I moved to Louisville, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which is a really brutal, fast-moving cancer most of the time because they typically don't catch it until it's stage 4 and has moved to other organs, which was my dad's case. So my sister was still up there in the area, and I started driving back every 2 weeks to help care for him because, I wanted to be with him as, you know, he had this very serious disease, but also because I didn't want my sister to have to care for him alone. That's not fair, you know, that she should have to put everything on hold. So I would literally drive up every 2 weeks and help take care of him and then drive back to Louisville and then drive back up. And that was wild, such a weird period of my life. I was very lucky that my corporate job, it was a remote corporate job, so I was able to do that and keep doing my work. And I'm also just really grateful to my neighbors in Louisville and the friends that I somehow managed to make in Louisville through all of this, who were just really, you know, they hadn't known me for that long, but they were immediately like, what do you need? Do you need someone to water your yard? Do you need someone, you know, they were great. So I was up taking care of my dad every 2 weeks, and he lasted about 9 months, which is about what you get with pancreatic cancer. It's very fast moving. So in March of 2023, he died of pancreatic cancer. And then that just left, he died in hospice. He was in hospice for about 2 weeks. So I sort of got to see the full spectrum of kind of how people, the different ways people can die, not the full spectrum, but several different ways, I suppose, that people can die. And it all happened pretty quickly. My sister and I kept making really morbid jokes of like, well, at least we won't have to buy, we can reuse some of the stuff from Mom's memorial, for Dad's memorial. And I have really amazing friends. So like I said, my friends who brought over Twister, when my dad was in hospice and it was in the last days, they brought over like self-care bags that we could like bring to the hospital with dry shampoo and fuzzy socks, and they cooked for us, and they helped so much. So really, I hope that everyone has people they can rely on like that, because that's really what you need is community in those moments. But I ended up executor. Like I said, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew it was something I would have to do. It turns out my parents had set up a living trust, or at that point it was my dad's living trust. So I didn't know this at the time, but that's actually great. It keeps you out of probate court, but it's still a lot of responsibility. Like, you have to fulfill aspects of the trust, and I had to manage their whole estate. They were snowbirds. They had a condo in Wisconsin and a condo in Florida, and I had to work on selling those and cleaning them out, and all the stuff that an executor would do, you still have to do it as a trustee. It's just you don't have to necessarily go through court to do it. And then, of course, there were some things that they forgot to put in the trust, so those still did have to go through probate court. So I got to do both. Really fun. But
such a blast.
Such a blast. It's just like a really fun time. But yeah, I just got so frustrated by the fact that I didn't, I was grieving my dad. I was in a really sad place where I just didn't want to do anything. I was lucky in that my work gave me 5 whole days of bereavement leave, which sounds ridiculous, but that's actually a ton in the United States. It's not federally mandated, so they don't have to give me any at all. But that's certainly not enough time to grieve, plan a memorial, do all the executor stuff. Like, no, I mean, I'm still, this 2 years later, and I'm still tying up loose ends with some of the estate stuff. Yeah, and so I just got so frustrated that no one teaches you how to do this, or no one seems to know exactly, like, where's the checklist? Like, what's step one? What do I do? What do I do when my dad has just died? Who is the first person I call? How do I know what to tell a funeral home, what a funeral home's going to ask for, that sort of thing, And so I just tried to lay out, when I started making this website, it really started, I think I was telling you this earlier before we were recording, but it started as a tweet back when Twitter was not so nightmarish. I tweeted something like, hey, would people like it if I made a My Parents Are Dead, What Now guide? Something like that. And then it went like semi-viral, not, wacky viral, but it went viral enough that I was getting responses from tons of random people telling me their stories, and the overwhelming response seemed to be, yeah, that would be super useful. So I have just extreme eldest daughter energy, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to make it myself. And that's what I did, and the rest is kind of history. It's been a wacky journey from there.
Wow. I too have eldest daughter energy, and my father... Someone has to. Yeah. Someone has to. Yeah. Someone has to say the hard things. Yeah. My father passed away from alcohol as well in 2018, and it's such it's like anticipatory grief, but compounded over the years.
Yeah. And
there's so many different types of grief that come with it, because depending how old you were, like, by the time I was, I want to say like 15 or so, it was starting to really show. And so in my brave 16-year-old brain, I'm like, I'm going to help him quit.
Yeah.
And it took many, many times to learn the lesson that you cannot make someone change.
No, they have to do that themselves, and sometimes they can and sometimes they can't, and it's really not something you can control. I'm sorry that happened when you were 16. I feel lucky, quote unquote, that it with my mom, it didn't really start until I was a full-blown adult. I was in my 20s. It was after her sister died that she had kind of started drinking more, and I think she was struggling with a lot of things, like her sister's death, with my sister and I both leaving the house. She was looking at retiring, and I think she just was trying to find a sense of purpose, without her job or her kids. What is she? And it just, it just started, it really snowballed, I think, kind of quickly. But then once that started, it was like over the next several years, she would go to rehab and come out of it and, and be okay for a while and then start again. And it just, for the past, like, by the time she died, for the past several years before that, every time my dad called, I was like, is it Mom? Like, is she dead?
I know.
And that feeling is just, oh, yeah.
That's, it, I just want to give you a big hug right now.
I want to give you a big hug too.
It's so hard. And to watch, I mean, it really started when I was 16. He didn't pass away until, I was early 30s. Mm-hmm. But at the time, we were actually 2 years estranged because of the alcohol and because it had just entirely consumed him. So I kind of had those 2 years to mourn the loss of what could have been.
Yeah, that's a special extra kind of grief, is when you're mourning a relationship that could have gone very differently had different factors been in place.
And you're like, what if, coulda, woulda, shoulda. And then when he passed away, very dramatically, by the way, Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow.
He was a grand gesture kind of guy, so
yeah.
I was not surprised at all. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm mourning the death of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, I know it's different for everyone, of course, depending on what age you are and where you are in life, but as an adult without parents, what is the thing that you tell yourself to get through this? Because I know that feeling of, man, I wish I could just call them right now because I don't know what to do with this recipe.
Yes.
Like,
oh my
I
gosh.
need an adultier adult. Please, someone just mother me.
Exactly. I'm 37 now, and I know that I understand that I am an adult in the technical sense of the word, but there are so many times when I just need a parent and I don't have one. So I have called my aunts and uncles, I have called my friends' parents, and I am fortunate to have a good relationship with a lot of my friends' parents. So if I need a parent to answer a parent question, but it's not the same. It's not the same as asking your own parents. Mm-hmm. I still feel, it's been years. It's been 2 years since my dad died, and my mom died in 2020. And I used to call them all the time when I was walking my dogs, or walking my dog. I don't have multiple dogs yet, but when I was walking my dog, and now I still sometimes get the urge when I'm walking my dog to call them. Mm-hmm. But I think the way I get through it is just kind of remembering that if I don't know what I'm doing, that probably means that they also didn't know what they were doing as much as they claim to. Because I think that's very normal for your children, that you put on a brave face and you put on a persona of like, yes, I know things so that you, child, do not have to worry because I will do all of that for you and do all the worrying for you. But I think most adults don't really know what they're doing, and we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along. And so that's something I try to remind myself of on a daily basis, is that nobody has it figured out. You're going to figure it out the same way everybody else figures it out, which is trial and error. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely been a ride, especially when I get to... So I didn't have a gentle childhood. And as I get to the same age that my parents were when they were parenting me, it's like, whoa. Like, I had them on a pedestal, and it was just, it's so hard. And now I'm here, I'm 39, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm trying to have fun while I do it. Mm-hmm. And of course, like the whole fake it till you make it thing. But at the end of the day, I'm still I'll tell people my age and they're like, oh, you're so young. You're such a young pup. And I'm like, no, this is the oldest I've ever been. I don't know how to be any older than this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm still trying to work through that.
People always tell me I am very young, especially after my parents died. They say, oh, you're so young. And it's funny because I am, in the sense of a person who has dead parents. Typically, people seem to be older when they lose their parents, because I was, I think, 35 when my dad died. Yes, because I'm 37 now. But I always think my parents were so young. They died when they were in their 60s, and they didn't even get to do a whole retirement situation, and they didn't even get to, live out. There was like a good chunk of their lives there that they could have still lived. So I always feel that they were very young. I feel like it's reversed in my brain.
I think so too. So my dad was 58, and I'm absolutely not dreading, but kind of curious. How am I going to feel when I turn 58? How am I going to feel when I turn 59? And I'm older than my dad ever got to be. And so, the intrusive thoughts of having ADD. And it's kind of, my parents not being here, it's bittersweet, because that's kind of what kick-started, okay, what do I want to do with my life? What do I actually want to do? Like, not what am I going to do 9 to 5? How am I going to do my taxes this year? It was like, okay, like those things are important. I mean, that's the society that we were born into and grew up with, of course. But, how am I going to fill my cup? How do I want to die?
It really, it really makes you think about that stuff, because I hope I will outlive my parents. That would be nice. But at the same time, live longer than they did. But if I don't, that gives me, 30 years, so I better get moving. I better start doing the things I really want to do and not worry so much about propriety or doing exactly what society expects of me or wants me to do, because I may not have that long in which to do it.
Yeah.
So I better get going. I better quit my corporate job. I better try this weird death thing, because if it fails, well, at least I tried, and at least I can die someday saying I tried it, and gave it a good college try.
not even just trying, like the things that you've put out there on your website, which for anyone listening is deadparentswhatnow.com. It's your legacy, because even if you were to stop today and you were just like, I did good, I'm done, it's still out there in the world for people to find, and it's a resource, and I think it's such a beautiful legacy to leave behind, because that's kind of one thing that really stuck with me after my dad died, is he didn't really have a legacy. And he wanted to be cremated, but instead he was buried. So it was like I didn't have something to hold on to. And so it's like, okay, what am I going to leave behind? Because children aren't in the cards for me. I don't want the, 2.5 kids and white picket fence. And I mean, I would love a white picket fence, not going to lie, but
I do have a white picket fence, and it is not something I ever thought I was going to have, but my house in Louisville has a white picket fence, and it's pretty great.
Yeah. I love that. I wish we had fencing at all, but
yeah.
I digress.
But yeah, I also am not, I doubt, unless something really changes in life, I doubt kids are in the picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's an adventure that I just don't feel equipped to handle, especially with how I grew up. I never had a good example of what to do, and I barely stumbled through on what not to do. So I'm like, I'm still trying to parent myself.
Sure.
And, growing up like that, most of the skills that I learned were actually from YouTube.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that guy? What is it? Dad, How Do I?
Yes, I have
Isn't
heard
he
of that, which is
awesome?
so wonderful. That's exactly what we need in this world, is more parents putting their skills on offer for people who don't have them and
Yes.
need the help. Yeah.
And there's this one, is he on Facebook or Instagram? Pop Pop.
No, I don't know that one.
He's this grandfather, and he comes up with 2 cups of tea, and he's like, "Hold on, grandbaby," and he'll just cheer you on, and "I know it's hard, you're doing good, have a tea with me." And I was like, do you have room for another grandchild?
No. Oh, that's so nice. I sort of get some of that energy sometimes. I've been volunteering at Hildegard House, which is Kentucky's only comfort care home. It's here in Louisville. So it's a place where people who need hospice care can go to live if they don't have a place to stay while receiving that care. So, for example, it's not always people who are unhoused, although it could be that, but it's a lot of times it's people who don't have someone who can stay home with them 24/7 to have hospice come to them, or maybe people who can't afford a private hospice facility or that sort of thing. But so it's kind of all walks of life, very different people. But I've been volunteering there, and most of the volunteers are retired people, are the people who typically volunteer there. I'm one of the younger volunteers. So that's how I maintain like boomer energy in my life is I volunteer at this place doing work that I really care about, but then also I spend most of my time talking with people who I probably wouldn't otherwise talk to, a lot of people in that age group. So it is kind of like spending time not with my parents, but people like my parents, or people who remind me sometimes of what my parents were like, or what people of their generation might think. And I tell them about the book that I'm writing, and they're like, "Oh, so cool. Let's see, like, can you show me an example? We're going to pre-order it when it comes," and I'm like, "Oh, this is so nice." Like, I love them. Yeah.
I love that so much. I do presentations as a death doula at, assisted living facilities and things like that to encourage pre-planning and just kind of get people talking more about death, because growing old is a privilege that not everyone gets. And so, afterwards, they'll come and give me hugs and say they're proud of me and they love me, and they'll tell me their stories. And some of the best stories that I've ever heard are from elders that I have zero connection with.
Yeah.
And you take that with you, and then their story becomes a part of your legacy, because you get to retell it, and you're kind of like, you are the sum of parts of everyone that you surround yourself with. And
That's
so
such a beautiful way of putting it, because you really are. It's like, it's such a, I think we live in a society that's so individualistic, and it's a good reminder that we are not meant to be individualistic. We are built of all of the people who came before us and all of the people who touch our lives even in small ways. It's like, that's what creates us as a person.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember I lived in Winnipeg, Manitoba many, many years ago, and I was early 20s. I was on public transit, and this older gentleman, he had that very, like, the soft features, that wise look, like, he's seen some shit kind of thing. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he was like, "Hey, you're doing really good." And I went home and cried like a baby. And I didn't know how much I needed that. And like 10, 15 years later, I still remember that. And it makes you wonder, like, what are other people going to remember about me? How have I touched other people's lives without even realizing it?
Yeah. Because you don't know. Like, you don't know exactly what you're going to say that really alters somebody's thinking or changes somebody's mind.
Yeah, and it's just I find that often comes when you're actually being your true, genuine self.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this awesome journey of self-discovery and prioritizing things. And I found, like, when I first started as a death doula, it was like entrepreneur mode, and oh man, I was focused, laser focused, and I couldn't figure out how to market myself as a death doula without it being like creepy or weird, like, hey, let's talk about death. And then I had kind of like my eureka moment. Like, I'm going to scare people off anyways.
Yeah, so just let the people who you don't scare off, you can still help them.
Yeah. And it's not my fault that they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's getting through that imposter syndrome is really difficult. And then I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. And now it's like I have more followers on Instagram for my podcast than I do for my business. And I was like really stepping into this weird, morbid, beautiful little niche.
It's amazing because you just... Oh, sorry, continue.
No, just of being death conscious.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm very lucky to have had all of this happen to me in a time when the death positive community is there and it's growing and there are more and more people interested in this. It feels very supportive, you know? It's like, yes, people don't think I'm crazy for quitting my corporate job and trying to do this. And they're very welcoming. They're like, thank you for putting this stuff out. Please come on my cool podcast. You know, just it's really nice to just meet all of these people who are aligned and think in the same way. And it feels like we can make a difference. It feels like as a group and as we grow, we can like pull more and more people in and we can really affect some change in this area that could use some change.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned before about community when you were grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not that you're like, quote, through your grief, but now that it's a couple years past, how is your community supporting you, and you know, what does that look like for you now? Because the reason I ask is typically after you've had a death in the family and your loved ones who are not connected are trying to support you, usually after 3 to 6 months, people stop checking in on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not malicious or anything. The world is still turning. They still have their lives to go on with. So I'm wondering what that experience has been like for you.
I know what you mean. There are certainly some people who kind of stop checking in after a while, but I feel, again, very lucky in this, is that there's a specific group of friends that I've had since I was a little kid, like since we were 7, one of them since we were 11, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but we have a group chat, and we talk about everything, literally, all of the time. So I don't know how people survive without friend groups like this, but it's like literally every iota of an emotion I have about, you know, like I'm feeling scared today because of X, or I'm feeling kind of bummed out today, and I realized it was because I was remembering the anniversary of my dad's death, you know, just whatever. We talk about literally everything, and they're so great. They remember my parents' death anniversaries, you know, so they're like on it ahead of time.
Wow.
You know, so and it's just that kind of care, and which is so helpful. And it's like, I know that I'm not going to go without that kind of support. It's like, I sometimes describe my support network as aggressive. I have an aggressive support network. So I think that's really lucky. And I recognize that it's not something everybody gets. And I really wish it were something. That's why it's really important for me to normalize talking about death and dying and all of this stuff, because I think the more we normalize talking about it, the more people are going to talk about it not just in terms of making death plans, but just talking about it with their friends in general. If we can make talking about this as normal as talking about reality TV or whatever, then you can just jump in there and not feel so weird. There's not going to be this barrier of like, oh, I don't really know how to treat this person who's grieving because like I've never heard about this before and I don't understand exactly what to say, So that's why one reason I'm really so passionate about talking about it, because it's just, we gotta get used to saying these things to each other.
Yes, I agree, and I'm so happy for you that you have that aggressive love.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I always genuinely wonder, because it's not just about grief, it's about everything that happens in my life. If I'm something exciting is coming up, I tell them. If something, and they tell me, and we all celebrate each other's wins and losses, and just send silly videos to each other when one of us is having anxiety. It's we have this constant check-in process, and it's because we're friends. It's like, it seems really normal. It doesn't seem like a formal check-in process. It's just that we're like constantly talking to each other about every single aspect about our lives, including like, I don't know, our poop or whatever. So it's just, it's just so, we're so unabashedly unafraid to talk about anything that it really is helpful when it comes to the really bad stuff. It's like, I know there are these people I can turn to, and they can turn to me, and we've got each other's backs, and there's no question about that. And I wish that everybody had something like that.
For sure. So I know you have a book coming out. So It's called My Parents Are Dead, What Now? A Practical Guide to Your Life After Their Death. And so in your book, which I can't wait to read, by the way, do you touch on anything to do for people who don't have that community, like journaling and self-expression and like what do you recommend?
The book focuses largely on the logistics of death and dying, because I do feel like we are kind of in a renaissance of grief resources, which is good. It's good that we're having these things out there, and we need more of them, because I feel like when I was growing up, especially, grief wasn't talked about, and the resources were like, you can go to a support group at a church or something like that. And now there's just so much more out there. Shout out to one resource I really love is Grieve Leave. Do you follow Grieve Leave at all?
No, what's that?
It's a website, and they a website and a community that you can join, but they just have, I wrote an essay for them once, it was great, but they have all sorts of different types of grief resources and discussions on their website, not just for losing a loved one, but like for losing a job that you really wanted, or losing a pet, or a breakup, or anything where you might be feeling grief in your life. They have all of these different aspects of grief all in one place, and I don't know, I just think they're great. So Grieve Leave is a wonderful site. Anyway, I got sidetracked. So, book.
Endorsements, welcome.
Yes, endorsements, yes. We'll just share all the cool resources. The book is mostly about the logistics, but I did obviously recognize that grief is going to be something that people are going to wonder about. So I do have a chapter at the end that has a lot of reminders about, for example, you can't blame yourself if you don't get everything right the first time. You can't necessarily predict everything that's going to happen. And so there's that whole chapter addressing grief specifically and like the emotional side of things. And then also at the end of every chapter, so this is on my website too, there are little sections, but at the end of every chapter, there's a section with Self-Care Skeleton, who is a special friend on my website. Oh. And Self-Care Skeleton tells you special tips about how to deal with some of the more emotional aspects, or just like just how to continue to live your life. So things like, you can tell people no, it's okay. Even if people are offering to help you, you can tell them no. Or you can say, I'll get back to you later, because everybody wants to help, but maybe you don't need 12,000 casseroles. Or, you know, you can leave your house. Like, it's okay you can like go see a comedy show the week after your parents died. It's fine. That's allowed. You can keep living your life even in the immediate aftermath of a death. You don't have to, if you're not, you know, crying 24/7, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're grieving wrong. There is no way to do that. It's okay to be mad, just as long as you don't take it out on other people. It's totally fine to be mad. I did give some fun thoughts about outlets for anger, like, you know, have you heard of rage rooms where you can go rent a room and smash things? Or I got really into metal. Like, once my dad, it was really funny. I never used to listen to metal a ton. And then when my dad got sick, and especially after he died, I got like way into metal music. It was like the right time for me to get into metal. So,
like what bands?
Yeah. I love Ghost is a band that I love. They're kind of goofy metal, but I love them. I'm going to see them they're coming to Louisville in July, and I'm very excited. I love Poppy. I love Nova Twins. I feel like, I don't know, there's a lot of bands, but I
love metal music.
Yeah?
What
are your recommendations? What should I be listening to that I'm not listening to?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I would start with the original works of Korn.
Okay.
Volbeat.
Oh, I like Volbeat.
I love Volbeat. Five Finger Death Punch.
Okay.
Are kind of like the quintessential I'm angry at the world, here's my song.
Yeah.
And they actually have this one song, what's it called? I think it's Shades of Grey, that I actually want to have played at my funeral.
Is it about death, or is it just about... Yeah.
It's kind of a letter from someone who has passed away to the people left surviving. And it's like, if you're reading this, that means I'm gone. And it's just such a beautiful song.
I'm writing that down because in my weekly newsletter, I have a section that's like the daily dirge, where I recommend a song about death, and then I add it to a YouTube playlist. So I'm always looking for songs about death. So I'm going to add that one to the list.
I have an entire playlist of songs about death.
Yes, perfect.
Oh yeah, that I don't share.
No, you should share. That's like, why I do the daily dirge. It's like we all need to listen to some songs about death sometimes.
We do.
It helps. Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that cry. Anyways, thank you.
Sometimes you need that cry, and sometimes you need, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but sometimes you need that cry, and sometimes you need that weird, dark, blistering, like, angry energy too.
Right, just that growl, angry at the world, and...
Yeah, it's okay to be angry at the world as long as you don't yell at people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, that's like one of my mantras is do no harm, but take no shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So boundaries are important. Don't be a jerk. Don't hurt other people because you can't understand your own emotions.
Yep.
I could go on. So,
yeah.
I want to thank you again so much for being on the show and having this discussion. Becky can be found online at deadparentswhatnow.com. There's also the name of your newsletter I absolutely adore. Just looking at it here now, it says, find your niche in the columbarium.
Yes, it's called the Columbarium. It comes out every Tuesday.
Okay. I can't wait to subscribe to that. And then if anyone listening here would like to give Becky some love and support, you can go to ko-fi.com. No clue if I'm saying it right. It's ko-fi.com/deadparents. And you can support her. You can leave a note. You can see other ways to follow her and support her online. And just, I'm so grateful to have met you, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been fangirling a little bit this whole time.
This is so exciting that I have a fan. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I always get really excited when people are like hey, you random person, do you want to be on my podcast? I'm like, yes, I do. This is so cool. Thank you so much for having me.
I love, and this is something I've never actually said out loud, but I love being able to nerd out about death without
feeling judged or like you're a weird person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I'm weird. That's fine. I love being weird.
Sure.
But
yeah.
But with it just being accepted, like being able to talk about the taboo stuff is, you're going to have to talk about it eventually. You can do it after while you stumble through it and you're going through grief and stuff like that. Or
you could just talk about it now.
You talk about it now.
Tear off the Band-Aid.
Normalize it. Prepare for it. You know, so before I let you go here, there is something that I'd love to ask you. Sure. I mean, I have a million questions. So I'll narrow it down to two. How do you take your coffee? You can tell a lot about a person.
Yeah, I like an oat milk latte. That's usually what I go with.
Ooh, okay, very classic, very, okay. Yeah.
I feel like the oat milk is sweet enough that I don't need to add a sweetener.
Okay, well, I think you're sweet enough that you don't need sweetener anyways.
Oh, thank you.
And what is your favorite planet and why?
Oh, what is my favorite planet and why?
Nobody asks us these fun questions anymore. I want to know.
Okay, I have two answers to that question. One is that, like, I will say Pluto because it needs to be defended, and as a millennial, I think that it's ridiculous that we have got... You have a Pluto tattoo? That's so cool.
I have two.
Oh, amazing. So Pluto's my answer because it needs defending, and it needs to be brought back into the fold. But also I will say Earth because we live here, and humans are, even as we do, like, awful things, at the same time, we do amazing things. And every once in a while, I'm reminded of how wonderful humans can be. And so I have to give Earth a shout out for having some rad people on it.
Absolutely. And Mars for having a cool robot. And
yeah, you know, I mean, really, you could make a case for almost any planet. They are all very cool.
It's true. But I mean, Pluto has a special place in my heart and literally over my heart as a tattoo. And you know what, Pluto, I'm not a planet either. It's okay.
Yeah, you can be a human, Pluto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a globe of Pluto.
That's so cool.
Right up there too. Yeah, I love the heart on it. Anyways, thank you again so much. And one last question, when is your book being released?
It is being released in early January 2026. So it's still a little ways out, but it should be available for pre-order probably sometime this summer or like late summer. So if you follow me on social media, or if you're on my website, or if you subscribe to the newsletter, I will be real annoying about it when pre-orders come out. You will know. So yeah, just follow me and you'll definitely know more about the book release when it comes up.
Perfect. I can't wait. I'm also going to add that if you go to Linktree/DearPsychopomp, I am going to have that on my suggested book list. So you can find it there as well. And I hope you have such a wonderful day. And you take care. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
You too. Thanks again for listening to today's episode. You can find me online at DearPsychopomp.com. That's Dear PSYCHOPOMP.com. Or contact at DearPsychopomp.com. I hope your weekend is gentle and full of opportunities and coffee and beautiful weather.